All right, let's go down to my favorite data sets. This sounds pretty geeky to have 5 favorite data sets, but from the Living Atlas of the World, it's probably Manhattan Coffee. It's been around a while, but it's the distribution of Starbucks locations around the world. Why do certain cities have more or less? What are the patterns of where these Starbucks are located? So it's designed to help people think spatially. Well, that's what I use it for. Popular demographics. So these are the American Community Survey and the U.S. Census data from 2020, and also the monthly American Community Survey now data is out there for people to consume. And for those of you that are in other countries, national statistics agencies are gradually putting their data in the Living Atlas of the World for you to actually start mapping and exploring patterns and relationships and trends. Real-time weather is also a perennial favorite of mine. The wildfire perimeters, the tornado tracks, the global hydrography, where you've got this nested sort of system of, I've got just major rivers, and then as I zoom in, I see watershed boundaries, and I see little tributaries, and I can even calculate what the viewshed is, or trace downstream. I drop a point on the landscape. Where does it flow to the ocean? I mean, simple analysis tools, but really effective to help students of all ages really think spatially. And then let's go to everyday and fun examples about why it's important to pay attention to data quality. Some of you know that I've got a data blog. I know this sounds super boring, right? Joseph's data blog. I can't stand my excitement, but it's so important to our modern world because everybody is a map creator nowadays, right? You, your students, your colleagues, you're not just map consumers anymore. You're a map creator. And because of that, you've got a lot of power at your fingertips, but you also have a lot of responsibility that goes along with how are you going to symbolize? How are you going to classify? How are you going to change your map projection in such a way that people understand what you're mapping and why it actually matters? So here's some everyday examples of being critical of the data. Some spatial, some non-spatial. George Mason University, look that up in Google Maps. The subtitle is Simple Chinese Fast Food Chain. Interesting. I thought George Mason was a major research institution. Does it have a Panda Express in the food court? I don't know why it says Simple Chinese Fast Food Chain after George Mason. Here, I found this in a catalog. Oops. Orientation matters. I did write to the catalog publisher, and I, in fairness to them, they did flip it, and orientation matters for certain images, right? Another one is I wrote an article with our chief medical officer here at Esri about the intersection between COVID, maps, and geography. And in so doing, I actually had to find out, in a bibliography, you've written these, where the National Academy of Sciences actually was physically located. And this was the result: a house at the end of a cul-de-sac in Englewood, Colorado. That is not the National Academy of Sciences. I've been by that building. I know it looks a little bit more ostentatious than this house, but be critical of the data, right? Why did that have the first results reviewed? Now, I know one of my colleagues is on here from Texas. I know it gets really hot in Texas, but this is really, really hot. And it's like Noah's flood. Look at the precipitation rate, 655 inches per hour. The pressure is the only thing that's normal. The wind gusts are off the charts, and the humidity is also off the scale. So if you weren't critical of the data, this was online for a whole year. If you were making an interpolated surface weather map from this data, you would hopefully say to yourself, there's something wrong here. And so indeed, I took a screenshot of this before it was taken offline and corrected. But this spike in temperature, et cetera, for Cleburne, Texas is clearly not accurate. And here's a fun one that is non-spatial, but it all points to being critical of data. Use data, but be critical of it. Understand where it came from, who created it, et cetera, especially when you're mapping. Now, I thought I was a pretty big Fab Four fan, but some of these aren't even songs. A Day in the Sky, Cans Buy Me Love, Penny Lance. Penny Lance is in my ear. That's not even a song. It's someone's misspelled playlist. It's not even an album. It's someone's misspelled playlist. So the point is, be critical of the data. Lots of examples in this Spatial Reserves data blog. The blog is all about where can I find data? How do I know if it's any good? And societal issues like copyright and privacy, location privacy, and ethics. Ethics are threaded throughout this. So I hope that Spatial Reserves blog is helpful. My colleague and I wrote a book about this. Again, it sounds really dry, but it's so important nowadays, especially like I said, when everybody can create data and map data and put it in this, for example, ArcGIS Online cloud or in GitHub or wherever you're going to put it, and other people can consume it. Okay, so I think that this is all quite important. Okay, name that place. We better go with another quiz, and to save sanity, I'm going to close a couple tabs, but let's go ahead and do another Geo Quiz to get you thinking spatially with just a few of these. And I've got more in this story map, and I've got more in the quiz than we're going to be able to cover. But this is a quiz that uses the presentation mode in ArcGIS Online, so it's easily set up. It gives you the functionality of putting slides together with real places. So let's go ahead and begin. Victoria Falls, Angel Falls, or Niagara Falls? Victoria Falls, Angel Falls, or Niagara Falls? Would it help if you're looking at the vegetation, right? You're looking at the orientation of this is north is at the top. So you're thinking, what do I know about all those three waterfalls? If I zoom out, would it help? So what if I zoomed way out to a very small scale? It's going to give it away, right? At some point, it's going to be pretty obvious that this is Victoria Falls. Okay, you guys did great. Aconcagua, Arenal, or Kilimanjaro? Let's zoom in on this one. You can see some active landslides. You can see there's not much vegetation at the top of this particular volcano. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, what do I know about Kilimanjaro? I know that there's at least for a while, there's some snow. How long in the future, we don't know, but there's some snow at the top of most months. Kilimanjaro. What do I know about Aconcagua? So it is Arenal, Costa Rica. And we took a group of educators there twice, and it is a very active volcano, very active area, as you can see from those landslide scars and so on, and the lack of vegetation at the top. A beautiful, beautiful part of the world. Okay, what about this? Urban rivers. London, Paris, or Hamburg? You're thinking to yourself, okay, Joseph, well, what do I know about the path of rivers through those cities? What about the street pattern? What about the land use? What about parks, patterns of city urban development? What do I know about those cities? What do you folks think? You got a chat box there. Anybody want to guess? Everybody's checking their email saying, this is torture, Joseph. I'd never want to be in this session again. There's just too much geo stuff. Okay, feel free to input your answer there. But it is Paris. Bon. A total. And the point is, you've got the Seine River running through there, right? The Seine. And it's fascinating to be able to look at the patterns of these big sweeping arcs of the river. And as you probably noted, you've got this radial pattern that is only common to certain cities around the world. Washington, D.C., because it was planned by L'Enfant. Paris, there's some other cities like this, but it's very distinctive in Paris, these radial patterns, the Arc de Triomphe, etc. It's fascinating to be able to do this. All right, I promised that would be the last one in this, but I just can't resist, so let's go with one more. Let's go with this one. This one's a little bit easier. Let's go with deserts. The Gobi Desert, the Arabian Desert, or the Sahara. Interesting, sort of a teardrop or eye shape of this particular one. This is, I'm not giving you a scale bar. Yep, thanks, Lisa and Heidi. Yep, awesome. I'm not giving you a scale. This is a big patch of land here. What if I zoomed out a little bit? You're seeing a big mountain range out to the south. It looks kind of arid off to the east. So Gobi, Arabian, or Sahara. You're probably thinking to yourself, if the Arabian Desert, I'm just going to start seeing some water bodies around it at some point. I don't see any here yet. Okay, yes, it is the Gobi Desert. Good on you there, Brian. Excellent. So this is, again, all linked to my Name That Place quiz, again, to help foster spatial thinking and so on. Now, folks, getting into geotechnologies, I think there are 5 forces. And again, these lists are, I believe, they're fun. They're somewhat arbitrary, right? The 5 coolest bands of all time. The 5 cool places to visit in Canada before you die, etc. Right? These lists are abounding on the internet. But I submit that these are 5 forces bringing us to a pivotal time in GIS. Geo-awareness. People are aware of climate, deforestation, wildfires, natural hazards, etc., population change, as never before. The level of awareness is at an all-time high. They don't always connect it to the need for geography education, environmental studies, geotechnologies, et cetera, but at least the awareness is there. And enablement. People are enabled to use mapping applications to find the public library, to find your grandmother's house, to find your way across campus. And they're now using the COVID dashboard. They're using other dashboards and web mapping applications, story maps, et cetera. They're either creating them or using ones that others have created. So they're enabled to use at least pieces of this geotechnology platform. And the geotechnologies themselves, having elevated into this cloud-based environment, I think are important for several reasons. One, these problems and issues that we talked about do not stop at disciplinary boundaries, right? They're not just economics, they're not just math, they're not just geography, they're not just city planning or engineering. They're all those things. And so it's important that we have, and we've got a ways to go, but we've made a lot of progress with diversifying the community in geotechnologies, where we get people from a wider variety of backgrounds than ever before, because that's exactly what we need, right, folks, to solve these perplexing, complex problems that increasingly affect our everyday lives. These problems don't stop at physical boundaries, like behind me and behind where I know Heidi lives, Mesa County, Colorado. Okay, that ridge. They don't stop at watershed boundaries. They don't stop at mountain ridges, et cetera. They transcend ecoregions and physical boundaries. They also transcend political boundaries, right? They're not just my city, my state, your state, your country, my country. They transcend all those political boundaries as well. So for all those reasons, geotechnologies in this cloud-based shareable environment is huge, because in the past, it was really clunky for us to share data. Like if Tom and I, Dr. Mueller, and I wanted to share data, yeah, it's too big to email. Tom, do you have a server somewhere? I got to fit it onto a disk. I mean, there were all these technical challenges. Not to say that the technical challenges are vastly swept away now. We still have some, and as some of you who are educators can well attest, and even those of you that aren't, bandwidth issues, right? We've got bandwidth variability around the world. Very much of a challenge when now we've got to teach online. How do we do that if students don't have the bandwidth that they need to do this kind of work, for example? And so many tools are cloud-based tools nowadays, right? I mean, Office 365, it's an app. They're apps, cloud-based apps. Anyway, the point is, the challenge now is, how do we incorporate these tools into our curriculum in meaningful ways to accomplish our educational objectives? Those are the challenges now, not so much the technology challenges, although those technology challenges are still there. Virtualizing your environment so you can run professional software in a virtual environment and all that kind of stuff. I recognize that there are still some tech challenges out there. But citizen science, I mentioned earlier my walkability, story map, dashboard, survey, that's all citizen science in action, right? And it could be invasive species on trees, invasive weeds, water quality, weather, et cetera, other things that people can collect in a citizen science mode. And citizen science goes back to the 1800s, as you well know, with the Audubon Society and birding and other things. But now we can instantly map that data. And remember, the map is not the final resting point. The map is a springboard to understanding and then taking action. So citizen science enabled with mapping is a huge force in our world, and only getting stronger. And again, you've got to think about data quality. Okay, if I've got ordinary folks going out and collecting data, and some of you are teaching middle school, I know, how can I be sure that those students are rigorously collecting that data in ways that that foster good decisions to be made? Okay, let's talk about the units we're going to use, the equipment we're going to use, the safety measures that we're going to use out in the field. So, and the quality control we're going to do on that data. So there's a lot of good citizen science data, even collected by students of all ages. Storytelling with maps. Now, maps have been used to tell stories for thousands of years, right, folks? From the clay tablets I talked about earlier, to the wood blocks, to the silver-plated maps, the maps on film, etched in copper plates, on paper, vellum, etc., other physical media, and now in the digital world. Maps have always been used to tell rich and deep stories in a short amount of space, whether that space was physical media or digital media now. No different now, but the idea now is that we can tell compelling stories with story maps, dashboards, infographics, and geovisualizations. Some of you may subscribe, as I do, to the Flowing Data blog and other blogs like it, which really kind of stretch the boundary, if there really even was a boundary, between maps and visualizations. Some of these visualizations are maps. Some maps are visual. I don't really care if there's a definitional distinction between the two, but it shows how much people are wanting to and employing spatial technologies to visualize phenomenon, patterns, issues. So again, we can understand things better and take action. So those are forces that I would just submit to you all that are important in our world.